only now that he asked his family what actually happened.
Michael Matheson.
Presiding Officer, I wholly accept that the data usage and the cost which has been associated with that are my responsibility, which is why last Thursday we as a family made the decision to reimburse the Parliament for the full costs which were associated with that. My use of the iPad when I was on holiday was purely for constituency and parliamentary purposes, and that was my understanding of all that happened with the iPad when it travelled with us. Clearly, things have changed as a result of the information which I now have. Can I also be very clear with the member? I did ask, and IT sought to try and get further details from the network operator on exactly what the iPad had accrued the charges for, and the network operator were unable to provide that information. I also discussed the matter with my family and received assurances at that time. Had I known that my family had made use of the data at that time, I would have met the costs associated with that. But I did not know that, which is why at that time I could not understand how the costs had been accrued. When it became apparent that we had accrued the costs as a result of actions within my family, we took the immediate decision to reimburse the full amount to the Parliament. So I hope the member will take my reassurance that as soon as that became apparent to us, that we as a family decided to ensure that Parliament were reimbursed for the full costs associated with it.
Rona Mackay.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Can I welcome the member's statement and ask whether he's engaged with the Parliament on data capping on parliamentary devices in the future?
Michael Matheson.
Presiding Officer, I am aware that the Parliament are undertaking a review of the existing arrangements which they have in place. In my own experience, my own painful experience of this, I'm more than happy to engage with the Parliament to offer them any assistance I can from my experience to ensure that no other member experiences this type of difficulty at some point in the future.
Megan Gallagher.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. For a family member to access the Cabinet Secretary's iPad, passwords would need to be shared. Can the Cabinet Secretary confirm if he has shared his device's passwords with anyone? Does he accept that this goes against GDPR rules, given the sensitive information held on parliamentary devices? And can he share with the Chamber when he first shared with the First Minister that his family members used his iPad during his family holiday in Morocco?
Michael Matheson.
In terms of the information I provided to the First Minister, I set that out in my statement. When I engaged with the Parliament's IT department about the difficulties which I had with my phone not operating, the advice I was given was that I could use the iPad for hotspotting purposes. My son, I had used a hotspot before. My son helped to facilitate that provision, and that is how they have been able to access the data that was provided within the iPad during the course of our holiday period.
Martin Whitfield.
I'm very grateful, Presiding Officer, and can I thank the member for his statement. We spoke yesterday in this chamber about the Nolan principles of selflessness, integrity, objectivity, accountability, openness, honesty and leadership. And we have seen, I think, across this chamber and outside the challenge that this statement has been, and I respect that. In the My Expenses that we use in this Parliament to authorise payments out of the budget that's provided by the Parliament from the taxpayer, we certify that the expenditure was appropriate and arisen. That was not correct in this case, was it?
Michael Matheson.
Presiding Officer, this was a cost which was accrued to the Parliament's IT provision, not through my office allowances. And it was funded centrally by the Scottish Parliament. So there was no claim for the £11,000 through my parliamentary office. I volunteered to make a contribution towards the cost, given the costs that the Parliament were facing as a result of the high roaming charges.
Jackie Dunbar.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Does the member agree with me that standards in public office are very important, and that's why it's right that he has referred himself to the Parliament Bureau?
Michael Matheson.
Presiding Officer, I've been 24 years in this Parliament, and I've always sought to maintain the high standards of the Parliament through how I conduct myself, not as a Minister but as an MSP, how my constituency office operates in supporting constituents, and how we have utilised the public resources that we are provided to undertake our job. They are standards that I've always sought to apply, and I will continue to seek to apply. I've acknowledged the errors that have been made in this particular instance, and as soon as those errors became apparent to us, the actions that I have taken in order to address them by fully reimbursing the Parliament for the costs.
Thank you. That concludes the personal statement.